Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Lookout. Today's the 23rd of September, and lots going on out there. Got weather coming in. Looks like a lot of the areas we've been covering over the past 6 weeks are going to get a good soaking here. And as we've talked about from kind of the beginning of this lightning bust, weather's really what puts out big fires. We have these lightning busts that start hundreds of fires. Some of the hardest ones to get to are the ones in the most difficult ground become large. And we don't do much about that because we can't usually. So there's lots to talk about on that tip about how we fight fires in the backcountry, what is actually possible, and how things unfold strategically. That's why you guys watch this channel, I guess. So we're going to talk a little bit about how things are wrapping up here ahead of these rains. Totally welcome a dialogue on this. A lot of this argument about how to fight big fires in the backcountry gets hashed out on Facebook, which I think is the worst possible place for us to do this. But we're interested in doing some more interviews over the winter on the Lookout. And so if you know what you're talking about and you have some strong opinions on how we do things or how you think we should do things better, reach out. We'd love to talk to you. Kind of have a forum here on the Lookout about large fire management, forest management, all these topics we've been covering over the past 6 weeks. So as I said, we've got some good weather coming in. So let's just jump right into that. Current conditions right now, looking at the PG&E website, pretty mild winds. I mean, these little ticks on their map are moving really fast, but the numbers aren't quite as hectic. 0 miles an hour in Happy Camp, 13 down in the Siskiyou wilderness, but zeros in the canyon bottoms, and really not that high. These are gusts. Temperatures are pretty low this morning. Don't see anything on here above 60. Humidities are pretty high. So I know I've been flashing a lot of humidities around and everything. Generally, we talk about critical humidities when they're down below 20. Single digit humidities are really extreme. But when you see that it's 60% humidity, oftentimes that's telling you that the grass just isn't really going to burn very well. The fine fuels at 60%. Generally, we don't have extreme fire behavior or a lot of potential for embers that fly from a fire that's torching to really start new ignitions. So as we said, here's the past hour. You can see the moisture streaming in here. The flat fire right about here is just starting to get kind of the first band of moisture. The forecast is for us to get quite a bit down here into the Klamath too. This is a 6-hour loop. You can see a lot of moisture kind of pushing down to feed this. So we got some good moisture coming. So we're going to jump into looking at the Anvil fire now. And talk about what happened in the last 24 hours. We don't see a lot of movement on this fire in the areas that we've been really focused on, say above the hatchery. What we do see is that the fire kind of is pushed out, slopped out a little past the line. There's a hand line here that got fired a few days ago, and then the fire has kind of been spreading in the next drainage where, as we mentioned, the original plan was prep this road, put in dozer line, fire this here, and try to keep the fire back in here, and that didn't happen. The hand line did hold, but the dozer line didn't. Anyway, there's a little slop over here, which just good that the rain's coming, right? Because otherwise we'd be worried. I mean, we still might be worried eventually about this rolling out and being a mess, but for now, the rain's really going to set all this stuff back. Coming to the north end of the fire, we were a little worried yesterday just because the firing yesterday had progressed out this ridge, but we had quite a bit of open fire line down below the ridge, which was in white. And there was potential, we thought, for the fire to come up out of there. But the firing operations now, as of last night, had tied into that dozer line all the way down. So we kind of have a similar situation down in here. The one thing that we don't really pick up on very well with these infrared that gets flown, say, at 10 p.m. is oftentimes firing proceeds through the night. And so even though at 10 p.m. the firing operation was only to here, it's likely that we kind of missed that call and that the firing had actually continued. So even though this IR from last night shows the firing has stopped here, in all likelihood, the firing operations continued, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's firing all the way out to here now. That is going to kind of catch or smit this fire spread from here. There's been forecasts for high winds out ahead of this rain, but the rain looks like it's pretty close to getting here. So the main thing to report here is that there's no fire as of last night's IR over the dozer line on the north flank of the fire. Over here to the east of China Peak, this has been a little stickier spot. Looking at the infrared here, the fire has continued to kind of march south here. And looking at the IR, it looks like there's potentially an old road in here that they've fired off of. We don't really know what's going on. It looked potentially on some imagery I saw, like there's some handline prep down to here. It drops off pretty steeply down this ridge. So this is still kind of one of those little bit dodgy spots. This is the far northeast corner of the Anvil fire. So nothing's probably going to happen. There's no fire suppression is going to happen on this flank out here. So it's not unlikely. Everything depends on when the rain gets here and how much it puts things out and how much we get, right? And this heavy kind of old growth, rain's going to really knock this fire down potentially for a couple of weeks. Doesn't mean that there isn't potential for a warming kind of drying trend with east winds to happen later in season, but that's every day that goes by, that becomes a little less likely. So there's still some potential if this fire gets to the bottom for what we call a slope reversal, especially with the strong south winds, and for it to run this ridge. As we talked about a little bit, it's just kind of raced right now between the rain and the wind. As we mentioned yesterday, there's really no plan to contain this side of the fire until you get out kind of to the edge of the wilderness. So the fire did continue to kind of spread actively to the east, not in a huge way, but some places, up to a quarter mile. Another place we were watching closely here now we're on the south flank of the fire. North is up. And there were a couple places the fire got across the line yesterday morning. The IR showed this white line is where the fire was, and here. And today's IR isn't showing any heat in the largest spot that crossed the creek 2 days ago. There's still active heat out in here, but it looks to us on the more detailed imagery like this is kind of tied into a road here and maybe a hand line. So they've got a lot of resources on these slopes, and the humidities and everything have been kind of favorable, especially at night. So just real quick to jump to a map from the team of the Anvil fire. It hasn't changed much from yesterday. These blue lines are roads that have been prepped as kind of a secondary line, and then the purple is potential contingency line if the blue line doesn't work out. It also shows these kind of completed lines all the way around now. So we've got the hand line that held, we've got the open fire line, and we got prepped roads and dozer line that we've kind of described here, and the wilderness is shown in the dark green. And as we mentioned, out to the east, way out to the east, there's some potential road prep that doesn't look like it's been done. As far as the fire running up and out of here in Division R, there's some potential road prep out there, but that also doesn't show that any of that has actually been done. So we'll see what the rain does here on Anvil. All right, there's the Anvil We're going to jump down here to Smith River Fire. Really not a lot to report on Smith River. We got Hyuchi here, Gasky, Idlewild. No new spread or anything showing pretty much anywhere on the fire except this corner we've been watching where they're kind of letting this burn in here along the edge. There's a little bit of spread here to the west. Not a lot. It's mainly in kind of this brushy type scrub. Craig's Creek. Other than that, Smith River Complex is pretty wrapped all the way around until you get up on the far. We're looking kind of northeast here. We've been watching some spread here that didn't grow much yesterday. There's a little slope-driven run here in the orange. Everything else really didn't move yesterday. And as we said before, that fire on that backside is kind of contained here by the hurdy-gurdy fire. All right, so now to the main attraction. Okay. So, lots of fire over here on the SRF complex, and I think it brings up an interesting kind of topic with how we map fires, how we talk about fires. That oftentimes we'll see a shape on the map of a fire history, a fire scar, we say, and that word scar is kind of loaded in that it kind of insinuates that the landscape was damaged by the fire. So after this fire's over, we're going to see this kind of shape on the map that shows us where this fire happened. And it's easy to kind of look at that shape and think, like, look at this map here of Anvil. And it's like, man, look at all that red. Like, you can, it kind of, cartographically, it kind of suggests that there was this equal impact across this entire landscape, that everything in red got damaged or somehow hurt or destroyed. When the reality is that if you look at kind of the satellite imagery, you see that it's much more kind of nuanced than that. You know, if we look at the Pearch Fire here by Orleans, if we draw a shape when this fire's done, we're going to have this big kind of red blob that covers the entire area. But when you look at kind of the satellite imagery, you see that this red area is the area that burned hot, and the green area is where there's still trees that are alive. And so I think we need to kind of move beyond kind of visualizing things in this kind of monolithic way, you know, because you've got, you know, the blob versus reality. And so that's kind of one of the things we hope to kind of accomplish here with our coverage, is that no one really talks a lot about the areas here that got good fire, the ways in which this landscape benefited from the fire we just had. So back here to the Mosquito, Bluff, and Blue Creek fire, they've all pretty much grown together now. That wouldn't have happened without a lot of work of people putting fire on the ground, right? And this is going to be something we talk about for a long time. It's something we have been talking about it for a long time. But in the case of this fire, it's a story we've been telling from the get-go, that they didn't have a lot of resources. They decided that they would back off to roads and box these fires in existing roads, and that they would attempt to maximize the benefit of having fire on this landscape. So what we see on the imagery today is that they are going for it, right? All this red here is new fire that was lit in the last 24 hours. All of this. And they've had this plan for a couple weeks now. And one thing that was really interesting to see on the maps for this fire, and these are public data, is that they really planned this out. These orange lines on the ridge tops are places where they figured out that if you lit these ridges and let the fire back down, you would minimize the intensity of the fire burning. And also the objective was to box in this entire area so that the fire that was burning out in here couldn't get a strong wind on it and blow up out of here. So they pretty much got it done. And yesterday was the day that they're like, hey, rain's coming, let's finish this job. Right? So this plan's been in place for a month or close. You know, it's been through several incident management teams. And so yesterday they got after it. They've been using drones a lot, less helicopters. But here we see this is a helicopter with a PSID machine on it, plastic spherical ignition device, and basically AKA ping pong ball machine, right? So you got these ping pong balls. They're filled up with a powder, and then this machine injects alcohol into the ball as it drops out of the helicopter. And that starts a chemical reaction, and when the ball hits the ground, shortly thereafter, it bursts into flame. And so this is them in action, and they're ping-ponging the ridges to get the fire on the ground. Anyway, a lot of us have been talking about doing this for a long time. Why? Why should we do this? Why should, so the conversation for my whole career has been, man, we know that backing fire off these ridges is effective in giving us the fire severity we need to reduce fuels. We also know that these ridges are places that we fight fires, fight future fires, and that reducing fuel loads on these ridges is going to make fire behavior lower on the ridges next time we have a big fire. Now, that's not to say that we're not going to kill trees and that we're not going to need to keep treating these places, right? Like prescribed fire is not a one and done type of treatment. You put fire on the ground with the objective of killing some trees, and then you've got a bunch of dead trees and they fall down and they make fuel for the next fire. And so once you introduce prescribed fire in the landscape, you really have this commitment to follow up and burn it again 5 years from now to kill a lot of the, to reduce a lot of the fuels that you created with your previous entry. And so that's one complaint that a lot of people have about this idea of using fire on the landscape scale, is that when you use a chainsaw or a feather buncher to kill a tree, it usually oftentimes gets hauled out of the woods, and then you don't have to deal with that future fuel. And if we're using prescribed fire on the landscape scale to kill trees and thin the forest, and that's what we're talking about with using prescribed fire often, is to kill trees, because we've got too many trees, the forests are too thick. And so really then that requires you to come back and burn again and burn again. And so I think there's a valid criticism there of, like last year on the SRF lightning complex, we did a ton of firing that looked like this, and really there was a lot of beneficial fire effects, but there was also a lot of trees that got killed. And unless we get in there and treat that, then yes, it's going to be worse next time. So all this requires money. It requires sustained investment. And what happens when we have a wildfire is money just rains from the sky. We spent hundreds of millions of dollars in Northwestern California in the last 6 weeks on these fires. And so the forest has taken advantage of that fire money and of those resources. When else are you going to be able to call up, when else can the SRF complex call up and say like, hey, we want 2,000 firefighters for the next 6 weeks to come and do prescribed burns for us? Like, that just doesn't happen. So anyway, they've taken advantage of this wildfire and the funding and the opportunity to put a ton of fire on the ground. And this is what that looks like. And now it's going to get rained on. And a lot of it's going to go out. Most of it's going to go out probably. A lot of it's going to smolder. But the thing that they did was they closed this box. So if this smolders for a month and then we get a big wind event, it's not as likely now that is going to boil up out of here and be a devastating fire. Anyway, this is, landscape scale fuels treatment. We talk a lot about it. We talk about increasing the pace and scale of prescribed fire. And this is what it would look like if we wanted to really talk about putting fire on the ground at the landscape scale. This is what it would look like. It would look like people flying helicopters and drones, ping-ponging ridges, filling in watersheds, prepping roads, burning around the edges, and then coming in, firing the ridges and letting fire back down. This is what we're talking about. We're not talking about 100 acres here, 100 acres there, 100 acres here, 100 acres there. We're talking about, hey, let's do a 10,000 acre watershed. So we're going to jump over, look a little bit at SOMS, at the Pearch Fire. Sorry, I'm going to jump back. I forgot to switch to my map. This is what it looks like. Ping-ponging ridges. Filling in watersheds along the boundaries and then putting fire on the ground. So this happened. This is happening right now. And people are stoked, man. People are stoked. People have been talking all my career. Everyone's been talking about this, from, first year firefighters to ICs. Everyone's known that this is what we need to do if we're really going to get ahead of it. And so there's a lot of people that, yesterday was the highlight of their entire career to do this. Anyway, I commend the leadership on the SRF. I commend the folks on the incident command teams that have been willing to come in and implement this strategy. They're taking professional risk. There's a lot of work going on right now with the tribes. The tribes have been strong advocates of this strategy. Coming down here, we see also on, so this is the Pearch Fire. We've been watching closely as Pearch is burned down towards our friends at Butler. It is also back down in some places to the Salmon River Road. And it looks like also there's been some firing along the ridges here out ahead of these storms to get fire on the ground out ahead of this. The idea being that if we wait for this part here, if we didn't light this ridge here, what we saw yesterday was with the kind of southwest flow that the fire squirted out down this ridge. And, we have spots down by the Salmon River. So the idea with lighting these ridges here is to create a buffer so we don't get big slope-driven runs, or wind-driven runs, rather. Anyway, from the get-go, also on the Perch, the idea was that this fire would make its way all the way out to Soames Bar. And we'll see. There's potential that the rain's going to completely shut all these fires down. So coming in here, just looking down, infrared showed some heat here at the Trip Road, and also down on the bar here. Don't know much about what's going on with any of that. This was last night at about 10:30 or 11. Don't see anything about it on Facebook this morning. So that's the Perch. So far, no structures have been lost. Don't really have much to report on the Happy Camp complex. Haven't really seen much happening there. We kind of stopped covering it. All right. I had some questions for Rachel Smith, who's the forest supervisor on the Klamath, and she got back to me. I asked for an interview, a live interview. And they wouldn't give me one. So we're going to do puppets instead. This standing in for Smokey Bear, we got Rachel Smith. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel. I'm the forest supervisor on the Klamath. And I've got the questions. I was working on a Smokey Bear hat for her, but I ran out of time. Anyway, appreciate the response. I wish that I could have done it live, but I'm glad to have Rachel here in the studio with me. Thanks for coming. And she wrote me some thoughtful responses, and I appreciate it. And the gist of it, let me pull them up. Let's see if we can blow this up a little. Okay. The gist of it is I asked her, does the forest see value in managing wildfires to larger footprint when they're surrounded by recent fires and risk to resources is low? And she wrote a long answer, and it says, by the way, the short answer to your question is yes. But basically what she says is they like doing it when the time is right, but the time is never right. She says we have to have enough resources. Early in the season, we're worried that the fires are going to get big and burn all summer, and that's not acceptable. Late in the season, our people are tired. And so, yes, she likes the idea, but there's never a right time for it. And so basically what we see on the Klamath is that the only time they manage fire is when they have to, because they don't have enough resources. So I was a little frustrated. Just everything she says makes sense, and I don't hold it against her as the administrator to be in the position she's in. She's in an impossible position of trying to keep everyone happy, of managing risk, right? And that's the problem with all of this, is that everyone who's in a position of power and leadership has to manage risk. Okay, so we asked her about managing the Hancock fire, and she said basically they didn't feel that there was a low enough risk of the Hancock fire burning out of the footprint, and so they chose to suppress it. I started off kind of feeling critical of that decision. From her perspective, I understand, and the strategy they ended up doing was the good strategy, in that it was fairly minimal amount of resources that they were able to use efficiently to do it, and that's what she emphasizes. But I think that the only difference between that being a decision that would fly and a decision that would have been a tragedy is a helicopter accident, right? And they flew 2 crews into the middle of nowhere and kept them back there and flew them out. And we've seen before that has ended in tragedy. And so, yeah, they got away with it. And so I'm pretty satisfied with the answer she gave me. One that was difficult, I think, it was not another answer I gave her that I didn't think was going to be easy to answer was, I said many of the residents in areas which could have been impacted if the Hancock fire actually grew large support the use of beneficial fire in the backcountry. Does the forest perceive the public as generally being supportive of or hostile to managed backcountry fires? And she didn't really answer my question. She said that they've got a diverse community and people are all interested in fire. But there's this kind of, it's an unwinnable question for her. So she said that the community's interested in getting timely and thorough information and having a detailed plan. But she kind of danced around the question of whether or not she thinks that she has support from the public on this issue. And it is complicated. Half her forest on the east side is a lot different politically from the west side. The last question I had was that when they have lightning fires, the social media accounts on the Klamath say, "We put out all the fires. We're great. Look at us. Love us. We put out all the fires. We're saving you. We're keeping the community safe. We're keeping you safe." And a lot of us bite our tongue because we feel like putting out every lightning fire in the backcountry isn't, in the long run, saving anything, and that it's just increasing the risk for future firefighters, future generations. And so she kind of, I asked her, do you have any plans with your Facebooking to tell the story of all the beneficial things that come out of these large fires? All the beneficial effects, all the reduced fuels, all the kind of tactical opportunities created on future fires. I don't think she really answered that question for me. I did get some input from the public affairs officer on the forest that they are working on some messaging around the good things that happened out of the Eddy fire. I feel like we've got, after a season like this, we've got a great opportunity to kind of, for the Forest Service to back away from just reactionary social media posts that try to kind of make a lot of people happy, and get a little more into the nuance. But I haven't seen that, I've never really seen that from the Klamath about telling the success stories and the benefits we got from letting these fires burn. So anyway, I appreciate Rachel's answering my questions and thoughtful answers. It felt a little bit like just that she has to speak in these really careful tones, these really measured kind of scripted responses, and that's why I would rather do an interview with her in person. So I appreciate their response, and I don't really want to have to do more puppet shows, but if we can't get in-person interviews, then we're going to have stand-ins, and that's just going to be kind of the way we'll have to do it. Okay. Don't see a lot of questions. Appreciate all your support. Wanted to let you know that we've got the Lookout website. And we've been working on this for a long time. The Lookout really started as a website. We weren't really doing live streams for the first year and a half, 2 years. So now we post all our videos here. We post our interviews. We post some more in-depth stuff. We've started to kind of abstract some of our older material into new material. We also have a newsletter that will give you kind of an update on what is happening on the site. So you can subscribe to our newsletter on the website right here at the top. Subscribe to the Lookout newsletter. You can buy some merch from us. We've got hats. We've got T-shirts. Sometimes I make axes and we sell those. And we've also got down here, you can subscribe. You can become a supporter, sustainer. You can donate at any level, and we appreciate it. We also have Venmo. Anyway, check it out. Got some stickers. If you subscribe, you get a sticker. Erica's making some beautiful coffee mugs right now, my wife. Using one this morning. They're rad. If we get a chance here going into the fall, we're going to make some more axes so you can actually put your fire tending ethic into action and go cut some brush. All right. Some good comments going on here. David K says, as a Klamath resident, I support the idea of putting fire on the ground. Just wish it was proactive at the right time versus reactive at the time when Mother Nature chooses to force the issue. Yeah, and I think that's the problem, is that what Rachel's saying is that there is no right time. Early in the season, you're worried it's going to burn all summer. Late in the fall, people are tired. In between, they don't feel like they have the resources. And so we have to deal with that reality. What does that mean? How do we get through that? Someone says, random question, what's up with the anti-ESRI sticker? For those of you who don't know, ESRI, Environmental Systems Research Institute, they are like the Microsoft of mapping. They make the software that everyone has to use to make maps. I started using their products in 1994, maybe. And then I used them for my whole career on fires. And it definitely took like 10 years off of my life having to use their products. They crash all the time. When they work, they're great, but they, over the course of my career, they have sucked. They have sucked. It's just like, it's the buggiest experience you could hope for. And when you're up at like 3 a.m. making maps that have to get published at 6, and your computer keeps crashing when you try to add a label or something else, like it's terrible. Anyway, I've got a lifelong grudge against Esri. I also don't like them because they're a big defense contractor, and they kind of like want everyone to think that they're saving the world with all their cool conservation stuff, and they are, but they're also like helping drop bombs on people and helping the government spy on people. And anyway, yeah, I don't like Esri. I try not to use their products. They work better now. Our company still uses them, the consulting company, because they're like the Microsoft or GIS. You have to. But that's my little punk ass revenge for all the shit they put me through, late nights in trailers trying to make maps. Someone says, oh, right on. Alexander O.C. says, I did mapping in a past life, and I also hated Esri. Yeah, you can Google like fesri.com, and there's Facebook groups that are fesri. Someone asked about definition of containment. Containment means that the firefighters believe that they can walk away and the fire will no longer move out of that area. And so when you see black lines on the map, it means that the fire is contained, meaning they're not worried about it spreading anymore. So when you have a fire that's at 50% containment, that means, hey, half this fire we're not worried about. The other half we still need to do some work to mop up. Hey, thanks everyone. I do see some requests for puppet shows. I'd love to do it. I don't want to be a big jerk about it. Nothing personal against Rachel Smith. I'm glad she was here today. Thanks, Rachel. Good to be here. We love the Lookout too. Thank you. Okay, bye everyone.